कूजन्तं राम रामेति मधुरं मधुराक्षरम् आरुह्य कविताशाखां वन्दे वाल्मीकि कोकिलम्। रामाय रामभद्राय रामचन्द्राय वेधसे रघुनाथाय नाथाय सीताया पतये नमः। जयत्याश्रितसन्त्रास ध्वान्तविध्वंसनोदयः प्रभावान् सीतया देव्या परमव्योमभास्करः परमव्योमभास्करः।
श्रीमते निगमान्त महादेशिकाय नमः। Jatayu, one of the lesser sung heroes in the Ramayana. The world recognizes at large Bhagavanta Hanumanta's contribution. Hanuman is treated with sheer respect, devotion and love. We will see his prabhavam in Kishkinta, Sundara and Yuddha Kandams, no doubt. But Jatayu is no less. He sacrificed his very life. Vedanta Deshika says, Vikrama Yasholabha Vikrita Jivita Gridharaja Deha Didaksha Lakshita Bhakta Jana Dakshinya. Such is the greatness of Jatayu. This is said on one side. Well, on the other side, there were two valid questions raised. What were those questions? When Rama, who was lamenting over the kidnap of Sita, cried to the Tilaka tree, to the Karnikara Pushpam, to Godavari Nadi, asking, where is Sita? Lamenting to Lakshmana that I cannot survive without Sita. Even after listening to the suggestions and advice of Lakshmana, continued crying. Suddenly looks at a dying bird Jatayu and says, go to Vaikuntham, I grant you moksha. So the first question, when he has the ability to grant moksha pradatvam, why should he cry? He can solve the problem. If he is not able to solve the very problem of how Sita has been abducted, how did he suddenly get the power to grant moksha? First question. Second, understandably Jatayu has more disqualifications. Not to get moksha, but how did he get moksha? To this, a great Acharya who was the prime disciple of Bhagavad Ramanujacharya in the 11th century. His name was Kuresha. Srivatsa Chinha Mishrebhyaha Nama Ukti Madhimahe Yaduktayas Kanthe Yanti Mangala Sutratav. So both the Acharya Bhagavad Ramanuja and his prime disciple Kuresha belonged to a gotram, a lineage called Harita. So they were Kulodbhuta of Harita Kulam. They were carrying the lineage of Harit Maharshi, Harita Kulodbhutaha. On a very side note, with many disqualifications surmounting me, probably the smallest qualification that I have to even touch Ramayanam is that I also belong to the same lineage of Harita Gotram. So Kuresha, the great poet, Bhakta, Paramagyani, says in the 11th century in one of his celebrated poems called as Atimanusha Stavam, Atimanusha Sheelavritta Veshaihi, Ativrittamara Vikrama Pratapaihi, Atilanghita Sarvaloka Samyam, Varaye Vaishnava Vaibhavavataram. In that he answers both these questions. The first question, Prichhami kinchana yada kila raghavatve maya mrigasya vashago manujatva Sita viyoga vivasho nacha tadgatignaha Pradastada paragatim hi katham kagaya. Hi katham kagaya. How did you grant moksham? To which he says, if the Lord chooses to grant moksham, there is no time and territory for him. There is no constraint of space and time. We cannot say you have taken Manushya Avataram, you cannot grant moksham. He may have taken the Manushya Avataram. He is the rule maker. He can amend the rules at any point in time. The other reason is, imagine a child has been given a bucket full of water and a small plastic cover. We should not support plastic. I am just using it for an example. The child opens the plastic cover and I say the entire bucket full of water has to come within the plastic cover. The child will pour the first mug, second mug of water, third. The plastic cover can't hold beyond it. As he or she pours the fourth mug of water and ties it up, for the first few seconds that packet full of water will stay as is. Slowly you see, suddenly there will be an outburst and water will start seeping through one of the holes. Why? Because there is too much of force put on that particular material. Similarly, the Lord chooses to be born for we to get redemption. He has packed all his Ananta Kalyana Gunam in this small form as Rama Avataram. He is trying to behave like a normal human being. But in certain occasions, even without his control, his Paramatma Gunam will just tear open and come. One such incident where that Paramatmatvam tears open is Jatayu Moksha. Because a normal, primitive, mortal human being doesn't have the ability to grant moksham to anybody, leave alone himself or herself. When Rama says, Gacha lokan anuttaman, go to moksham, for that instance, he forgot that he was a human being and he attains his Paramatma Swarupam. Answer. Next, with respect to disqualifications. What are the qualifications to get moksham? That you have to resort to one of the upayams, the means to attain moksha. The Jivatma has to resort to a means. You know the Tattvam, you know the Hitam, the means, and you know the Purushartham, the fruit that you will obtain. After having sound knowledge of this, you resort to a means. Did Jatayu do that? As much as we know Ramayana from Valmiki and other versions, there is no mention of him performing Karma Yogam, Jnana Yogam, importantly Bhakti Yogam or even Sharanagati. There is no such mention. So let us assume that since there is no mention, he has not performed Bhakti Yoga or Sharanagati. So that is the first disqualification. Second, he was the one who used to survive on dead matter. Hygiene is paramount in Sanatana Dharma. Ahara Shuddhau Sattva Shuddhihi. Sattva Shuddhau Dhruvasmritihi. Even the Western world says cleanliness is next to godliness. So godliness comes first. Next comes cleanliness. In Sanatana Dharma, cleanliness in both physically, what you eat, your surrounding society is equally important as much as godliness. So in such a scenario, this bird has been a scavenger eating on dead carcasses. All the carcass, all the dead matter that lies, this bird will eat. So what orthodoxy does the bird follow? Nothing. Second disqualification. Third, by fighting against a person who had mastered the Vedas, it was killed by that person. Ravana was a person of no character. But initially it used to be said that Brahmanas had to be very, very calm. They should not get angry. Don't curse anybody unnecessarily like Durvasa. Be very calm. So they had to win over anger, they had to win over lust. On the other hand, Ravana neither won over anger nor lust. But he was still a person who had mastered the Vedas. So it was a presumption in those days that if a Brahmana kills the other person must have provoked him to that extent. Which may not be true in the case of Ravana. Though he was a Brahmana, he did not imbibe any quality that Varna should have. So he was killed by a Brahmana. Jatayu was killed by a Brahmana. So that person is called Agrahyata. So there were three disqualifications. The Acharya says, Akshunya yoga patham agrahyatam Jatayum tiryanchameva bata moksha pathe niyoktum shaknoshi vetsi cha यदा स तदा कथं त्वं देवीमवाप्तुमनलं व्यतिथो विचिन्वत्. But he got moksham. How? Because the Acharya says very clearly, despite a slew of disqualifications, if the Lord out of his karuna, anukampa, daya, mercy chooses to grant moksham to anybody, no disqualifications can stop the Lord from granting moksham to that person. So this is the second understanding. Now Jatayu submitted himself to the Lord and attained moksham, says another Acharya called Deshika. Avadhirya chaturvidham pumartham bhavadarte viniyukta jivita san labhate bhavata phalani jantuhu nikhilan yatra nidarshanam Jatayuhu. The commentator Govindaraja too substantiates Valmiki's claim that Rama granted moksham to Jatayu and that Jatayu went to Vaikuntham using these two quotations. From Nisimha Puranam there is a quotation. Matkrite nidhanam yasmat tvaya praptvam dvijottama tasman mama prasadena vishnu lokamavapsyasi. Another quotation. Atha yadataha paro divo ज्योतिर्दीप्यते विश्वतः पृष्ठेषु सर्वतः पृष्ठेषु अनुत्तमो भूतेषु उत्तमेषु इत्यादि श्रुति प्रसिद्धान् विष्णु लोकान् गच्छ. Then Rama, after having bathed and offered water according to the scriptures by performing the final rites for Jatayu, Shastra Drishtena Vidina Jalam Gridhraya Raghavau Snatvatau Gridharajaya Udakam Chakratustada. Now, immediately the society in those days debated. They said Rama is a Kshatriya who has learnt the Vedas. How did he end up performing the final rites for a scavenger bird Jatayu? Isn't it against our societal norms? The commentator gives the reason. Nanu Vaidikottamo Ramaha katham hina jatim tiryancham Vaidikena karmana samskritavan. How did Rama belong to the Kshatriya kulam perform final rites for that Jatayu which is not so great? Maivam tasyatyanta bhaktatvena jater apagamat. For which the commentator says, Na shudra bhagavat bhakta vipra bhagavata smritaha sarvavarneshu te shudra yadvatta yad janardane. If you are a devotee of Janardana of Vishnu, whether you are a Chandala, whether you are a Shudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya, Brahmana, doesn't matter. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you are a Bhagavatottama, the best amongst devotees. How you are born, what is your chosen profession, how your family members are, doesn't matter. Your actions is what that determines this particular outcome. So, Rama undoubtedly, without any hitch, full-heartedly, wholeheartedly performed the final rites of Jatayu, says Valmiki, and even Kalidasa concurs. Tayos tasminna vibhuta pitrvyapattishokayoho pitari vagni samskarat paravavrite kriyaha. So he performed the final rites. So this question of one varna performing final rites for the other varna, is it wrong? Will the society accept? Is all broken. Because in Bhagavad Bhakti, there is no varna, you will have to respect each other. Then Rama orders him to go to Vaikuntham. Says even Tulsidas ji, Tanu tajitat jahu mamadhama devo kah tuma purana kama. Go to that lokam. You don't have to be born again at all, Jatayu, says Rama. Jatayu Moksham is an important juncture in Ramayanam that answers so many questions pertaining to Paramatma, who is Rama, to a Jivatma, who is Jatayu, to Bhagavad Bhakti which Jatayu had towards Rama, and towards Moksha Pradatvam which Rama had towards Jatayu. Next episode, more interesting content.
Dear Astika reader, I am happy to be authoring a two-part book
on the Ramayana in English. The first part is slated for release in the year 2024. The book aims to recreate and retell the Ramayana of Valmiki, conforming to the ancient commentaries and other allied literature. To receive notifications of the book release, kindly register with www.deshikadaya.org/books. Namaskaram.